Hey guys, how's it going? Yuri here. Hope you're having a great day. Now today in this video, I'm going to be, this is kind of a little intro. I'm going to be going over to my computer in just a moment. I'm putting together a few videos on heart disease because heart disease is unfortunately still the #1 killer in the Western world. So obviously what we've been doing is not really working. So I just wanted to say hey, and I'm going to take you over to the computer in just a second to walk you through some really interesting graphs and stats and some cool display stuff, some really funny drawings that I'm going to do for you on the computer in just a moment to help you make sense of this all. So stick with me for a couple minutes. I'm really going to open your eyes to some crazy stuff here, and so let's get over to the computer. All right, welcome, Yuri here, and I want to take the next couple minutes together, so please put this time aside. I'm really going to shock you, I think, with some really interesting stats and facts about heart disease, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. So what I'm going to show to you over the next couple minutes is nothing more than a bunch of pictures and charts and diagrams, which I think will illustrate this fact pretty nicely. So while we go through this, I want you to think about two things. First of all, I want you to question everything you've ever been told about heart disease. And specifically, I want you to question the paradigm which tells us that meat or saturated fat and cholesterol are the two big causes of heart disease. Okay, I just want you to keep those in mind as we go through this. All right, so I'm going to be using this cool little drawing thing that I have called the Wacom Bamboo Pad. I can draw some stuff out. It'll look like a 4-year-old drawing, but maybe I'll add some stuff to these pictures. Maybe not. We'll see how it goes. All right, so the first thing I want to illustrate to you is these two charts. Now, these come from the CDC, I believe, or the World Health Organization, I can't remember. Essentially, they show us that over the past 100 years, since 1909, okay, so let's look at the top one up here. Since 1909, right there, to 2005. Look at the trend here in U.S. animal fat consumption. Well, what do you see here? What's the trend? It's pretty obvious that we're consuming fewer animal fats. Okay? Now, over that same period of time, look what's happening to corn oil consumption. Let me just draw a very simple average right there. It's obviously increasing. Okay? So just keep that in mind. So we're consuming more corn oil, and for that matter, we're actually consuming more polyunsaturated fatty acids, which are all those vegetable oils, corn oil, soybean oil, canola oil. All of those oils really started to ramp up production, especially after World War II. Okay, so we saw an exponential increase in their consumption over the past 50 years. So we're seeing less animal fat consumption, more vegetable oil consumption, and at the same time, we're also seeing more obesity, right? Which is interesting because now it's okay. Well, animal fat, we're eating less of it. Obesity is going up, right, as we see here. But also another thing that's happening here is sugar consumption, which is shown on the right here. Sugar consumption is also exponentially increasing. And again, this is since 1850 now. And there were obviously some things that happened in that period of time, the introduction of like cane sugar and the developments of high fructose corn syrups, right, which are now becoming very, very prevalent in modern society. So we're seeing some interesting trends from a food consumption perspective. Okay, moving on. This is a little bit hard to see, but this essentially shows us that this shows us the number of hospitalizations for ischemic heart disease, essentially heart attacks, right? And this is in Canada. This is actual and projected by sex between 1980 and 2025. So 1980 is down here. And you would think that with all the money we spend on Heart Month and all these heart disease campaigns, that we would see a decrease in the number of hospitalizations or the number of incidents of heart disease because of all this money we're spending. But what's happening is the complete opposite. And this is Canada, which in essence is actually better off than the US. So the US stats for this would be fairly similar, if not worse. So what we're seeing here is actual, which is between right here, okay, right to there. We're seeing an increased trend between 1980 and 2005, or 2000, sorry, just about 2000. So that's actual stats. Now, projected based on this stuff, we are projecting an even greater increase of hospitalizations due to heart disease by 2025 in both men and women. So what the heck is going on here? Let's look at some more stuff. How about this? This is fascinating. This looks at the comparison between heart disease rates in men aged 35 to 74, which is kind of the prime candidates for heart disease, and average cholesterol levels in 15 countries. Okay? Now, the death rates for heart disease are down here in the dotted lines, and the average cholesterol level is up here. Now, what do we notice? The highest levels of cholesterol are associated with the lowest levels, in most cases, of heart disease and death from heart disease, specifically Switzerland, Iceland, Germany. If we look at France, right down here, France has the lowest incidence of heart disease death in pretty much the entire world. They also have an average fat consumption, saturated fat consumption of about 17.5% of their daily caloric intake. That's very high, and compared to countries like Lithuania, whose fat consumption is quite a bit less. I believe Lithuania is somewhere in the range of about 7% saturated fat consumption. They have one of the highest rates of heart disease. And when you compare that just to France based on fat consumption, that's pretty interesting. If we look at cholesterol levels, France, considering the amount of fat they have in their diet, has a lower amount of cholesterol in their blood than Lithuania does. And Lithuania has 2 times less saturated fat in their diets. Okay, so wow, this is starting to really, hopefully this is starting to really make your eyes pop. This is crazy stuff, right? Moving on. Let's look at 2 huge studies. There was the health professionals follow-up study, which was done among literally doctors, health professionals in men, and there's the nurses health study in women. 2 of the biggest studies ever done. What they found was that this is basically identifying the percent with highest cholesterol, okay? So in this group of men, those who had the lowest intake of red meat had the highest percent cholesterol in their blood. And those who had the highest red meat intake had the lowest amount of cholesterol in their blood. Well, what's going on here? Similarly, and not as evident, I guess, in the women's health study, the nurses' health study, those with the lowest red meat intake had the highest cholesterol, and those with the lowest or the highest red meat intake had slightly less cholesterol. So it was much more evident, obviously, in the men versus the women, but still a common theme was seen. More red meat, less cholesterol. Now, if we look at the US, obviously we're very interested in the US here. No surprise that Middle America, unfortunately, has a little bit, not as great of a not as great as a health bill as the East and West Coast. But if you look at California here, California is obviously a very health conscious area, right? Look at this. Like, there's almost no heart disease nor death from heart disease compared to the Southeast. When we start looking at New Orleans, Alabama, So anyways, I just wanted to show that to you to let you know that depending on where you live, you can be obviously at greater risk for heart disease depending on the foods that you're most commonly consuming. And if we think about Southern foods, what do we commonly think of? Let's look at the example of Kentucky Fried Chicken or some good old Southern fried chicken. It's not the chicken that's the problem, it's the frying of the oils that becomes the problem. And you'll learn more about this as we spend more time together. Okay, so here's another chart showing that the amount of saturated fat, which is these little, if you can see this, these little blue lines up here, okay, just at the bottom here. And basically the green line shows you the trend. So there's an increasing trend in these countries to have more saturated fat, yet they have less heart disease. Switzerland again, Belgium, Germany, these same countries that we just talked about, have higher consumption of saturated fat, yet they have less heart disease. Interesting stuff. And Switzerland, we know, enjoys their chocolate. So does Belgium. How about some more trends? Mortality rates between women and men. Okay, this is just basically showing you that we've made very little progress since 1979 and even earlier than this to 2004. So we started off in 1979 at this level. Okay, and I'm just going to draw, this is for women. I'm going to draw a line across, and we're almost at the same place we were in 1979, which is obviously not that great. Now for men, we've made a little bit of progress. We've kind of, you know, maybe taken a little dent from 500 deaths per 1,000 to 420. So we're making some headway a little bit, but still we're not making the type of dent in this disease that we should, because still heart disease is the #1 killer in the Western world. Why is this happening? Well, I firmly believe it's because of misinformation and almost money-driven advertising campaigns, which is really confusing you, the consumer. I'm going to show you some examples here. A couple years ago, I was on breakfast television in Toronto, and I was really passionate about educating the viewers about this whole health check program that we have in Canada. I believe the US has something similar called the Healthy Check or something like that. Anyways, you'll see in Canada these foods, again, you'll never see this on a vegetable or fruit. You'll only see this on packaged and canned things that come from these big food conglomerates, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So you'll see these health check symbols, and essentially this is a stamp of approval from the Heart and Stroke Foundation, which says, hey, you know what, consumer, this food is good for your heart. Enjoy it without any guilt. Well, that's unfortunate, because when you think about Heinz, you don't really think about, you know, health, right? Heinz ketchup, Heinz is a very big food conglomerate. You don't really, you know, the two don't really go hand in hand together. So we have these health check symbols that are being put on all the foods across, like literally it's almost all these crappy foods in Canada that are displaying this. Now watch this. How about this? Harvey's. Have you ever been to Harvey's, which is a fast food restaurant? Well, now guess what? They've got a health check approval too, because they have a new health check certified menu. Because apparently their grilled veggie burger, which is, I'm sure, based on garbage like soy and corn and all sorts of other stuff, is now healthy for you. Why? Because it doesn't contain meat, and therefore it doesn't contain saturated fats. Okay, guys, I hope you're seeing the trend here, that we've completely missed the mark with respect to what is causing heart disease. It's not the meat. Although, I mean, copious amounts of meat consumption is probably not the best thing to do for overall health in terms of cancer and other things, but it's not the damn meat. And especially if the meat that you're eating is of good quality, that's not the big issue. And I'm not saying, again, as you know, I'm not a huge proponent of eating copious amounts of meat. I believe if you eat more plant-based foods, the right kind, it'll transform your health. And obviously limiting animal product consumption is a good idea, but I don't want you to be scared of egg yolks. I don't want you to be scared of red meat if it's of good quality, grass-fed, pasture-raised, all that stuff, because that's not the problem. That is not the problem, as we've seen throughout these last several minutes together. How about this? Pizza, which is like Domino's Pizza in Canada. I don't know if they have pizza in the States, but look at this. They have pizzas now that have the heart check or the health check symbol. When in the history of man has pizza been considered a healthy food? Especially for your hearts. Especially for your hearts. So again, what is going on here? This crazy conspiracy. It seems like a conspiracy. Well, here's what's happening. A couple years ago, the CBC, which is a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is like CNN of Canada but better, did a really interesting investigation. They put together these really cool investigations where they really expose what's happening. And they exposed what this program is doing. The Heart and Stroke Foundation is literally receiving millions and millions of dollars from these companies like Campbell's, like Pizza, like Heinz, to have their health check symbol put on their foods, to somehow dissuade or persuade consumers to let them know that, hey, this is okay for you. So these companies are spending millions of dollars to have a health check put on their foods, which in most cases should not be there. And let's look at one example here. So I think I mentioned a couple years ago, I was on breakfast television. I was talking about this, okay? So I'm going to tell you why this all went down. So look at this. I'm going to give you the perfect example. I believe this would be an example from the US because it has this heart healthy thingamajig there. That would be like health check in Canada. So I want you to, it's a little bit tough to see, but the serving size here is half of a cup. 1/2 of a cup. Now, if we look at, I don't know if this is serving the entire, well, usually most of these cans are at least 1 cup, right? If not more. Now the serving size is half a cup. So you look at the label and you see half a cup. You don't really notice half a cup, but you look at sodium and it says 470 milligrams of sodium right there. That's 20% of your intake for sodium for the day. But remember, this is half a cup. This is not even the full can. So let's assume the full can is one cup, so twice this. If you had this whole can of chicken noodle soup, which again has this heart healthy symbol on it, telling you that it's okay for your heart, you would be consuming 940 milligrams of sodium, which is way more than any product claiming it should be healthy for your heart should contain. And why is that? Well, sodium, if you intake a lot of sodium, it increases your blood pressure. And what do we know about blood pressure? It's a risk factor for problems with your heart. Okay, so you can see why this is a big fallacy. It's a big joke. It's a big fallacy. So here's my recommendation. And this is what I recommended to viewers on breakfast television. First of all, I couldn't actually show the name brands of these cans. I had to actually cover them up with black tape because what happened was a lot of these brands were actually sponsors of breakfast television. So it's kind of funny. So anyways, I went on the show and I showed the viewers, I'm like, here's what's really happening. You have a health check symbol on this, unlabeled can, and you have 900 milligrams of sodium, or this one has 1400 milligrams of sodium, but still it's considered healthy. And look at this, on this label, it has 45% less sodium. 45% less sodium. So what does the regular one have? Almost 2000 milligrams of sodium in one can. That is ridiculous. It's crazy, right? So anyways, so I went on breakfast television and I showed the viewers that this stuff is ridiculous. And I'm going to share a very, very important takeaway for you is that if you see any, first of all, if you eat packaged foods, you really want to cut them down. But let's say you had no other option but to eat packaged foods, don't eat the ones that have these health check symbols on them because they are nothing but lies. Okay, they are deceiving you and they are lying to you, and that is the truth. The second takeaway I want you to get from this is that saturated fats and cholesterol are not the enemies. You can have the whole egg. Don't go to an omelet station and order egg whites. Don't buy egg whites from the grocery store. Get the whole egg and enjoy it, because the egg yolk contains amazing amounts of nutrients that your body requires. And remember, the whole food is always going to be metabolized and absorbed more effectively than just its fractions. So anyways, I hope this presentation has made some sense for you. I've got another really cool one coming your way tomorrow. So thanks for joining me. And if you have any comments, I'd love to hear your comments. Just let me know below. And we'll... All right, so we're back. Pretty awesome stuff, right? Hopefully that opened your eyes to some really interesting facts about heart disease and what it is not and what we're doing wrong and what we could be doing better. And if you enjoyed this video, then again, remember, this is the #1 killer in the developed world. #1, heart disease. It's a very preventable condition. And if you know anybody who is suffering from this, then please pass this video on to them. It's very important information they need to know about. And to make things even better, tomorrow I'm going to be releasing another video in which we're going to be talking about statins and heart disease type medication, which you need to know about as well. So be sure to stay tuned for that video. And once again, thanks for joining me today. Hopefully you found this video insightful, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.